Benvenuti a tutti. Welcome, everyone. Here I am in Tuscany on the road just leading up to Castello di Monsanto. Don't I wish? It's actually through the magic of technology and a lot of wishful thinking. Lars Light, hello. Through a lot of technology and a lot of wishful thinking, I have this little green screen behind me. And so this is a picture of vineyards in Chianti Classico in Barberino Valdelsa, which is just down the road from Castello di Monsanto. And our special guest today, I'm sure many of you have met over the years, or certainly seen a picture or a video of, read about her in a publication, or even if you haven't done that, you've certainly tried her wines and love the wines. And her name is Laura Bianchi. Laura, buonasera.
Buonasera.
Come stai?
Buongiorno to you.
Buongiorno to me, yes. Yes, we have people from all over, so hope everyone is doing fine. We have a lot to talk about today, and we have just under an hour because we want to leave some time for questions. I'm already speaking fast, so I'm going to slow down a little bit. But first thing I'm sure everyone wants to know is, how are you doing? How is your father doing? How about everyone at the winery?
Thank you, Tom, for asking. Everybody's fine. Everybody in the family and at the winery are well, so we're lucky. We're more lucky than other people because we can walk around in the vineyard, in the forest. It's not an easy moment, but we're facing the situation.
Yes. And regarding the vineyards and working outside, how has the winter been? How is the spring going? You said today it's raining a little bit.
Yeah, the winter has been very dry and mild in temperature, but in the last 2 weeks we had some rain. So we can get some reserve of water for the vines.
Okay, good. And we all know about the last 3 weeks in Italy, 3-4 weeks, and with the businesses being closed and no restaurants being open. So that's obviously affected everyone. And I just read some good news yesterday. I guess the Prime Minister declared that restaurants will now open on the 1st of June. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry. And then next Monday. Go ahead and finish. I'm sorry.
So next Monday, there will be what we call in Italy phase 2. So people will be able to go a little bit more outside of their apartments after almost 2 months of lockdown. And then, but not for restaurants and bars. They will open on June 1st.
And so on Monday, will you be able to go to, will the markets on the street be open? Or?
Yeah, all the food stores has always been open,
Okay.
supermarkets and food stores. But from Monday will be open only few other stores, like bookstores or just few other categories. Most of the shop will stay closed probably till the middle of May.
Okay. Well, that's some good news. That's encouraging, and that's what you need to hear.
Yeah, and thank to God, contagions are going down a lot in the last days. For instance, in Tuscany yesterday, only 32 contagions, so very, very small.
Oh, that's very small compared to what I've read about. So good. Okay. Yeah, we're getting a little bit later in the United States, but as they said, andrà tutto bene. So we all have to be positive. Everything will be fine. So let's talk. Yes. Okay. Let's talk a little bit, first of all, about your history. Your father, the first vintage was your father is Fabrizio, and his first year of production was when?
1962.
1962.
Yeah, the winery has been existing since 1700 and takes the name from the village where we are located. Monsanto is the little village that we surrounded with the vineyards. In the Italian language, Monsanto means a holy mountain.
Okay.
Because a saint, San Rufiniano, died here in the Middle Age, in 998, and the church paid homage to this man, calling the village a holy place, holy mountain. And then my grandfather Aldo, who was born in San Gimignano, the beautiful medieval village near here, he needed to move before World War II to find a job. So he moved to Milan, where later he opened a textile business. And after the war, he wanted to buy something near where he was born. And someone told him, there is a beautiful estate. He came here, he opened the window of the house, and he saw San Gimignano, and he said, this is the place.
Okay.
And this was 1961, 60 years ago.
How many kilometers away is San Gimignano from?
It's about, by car, 15 kilometers.
Okay, because you're part of the commune of San Donato and Poggio, see?
Yes, the district of San Donato.
And you're in a little frazione called Barberino Valdelsa, is that correct?
Yeah, it's
And
the name of the comune.
now, I visited last year, I remember I visited the first day, and that's the first time I'd been in Chianti Classico in like maybe 5 or 6 years. And I forgot how large it is. I mean, quite often I'm in Piemonte in the Barolo zone in Delonghe, and that's relatively small compared to Chianti Classico. I couldn't believe how long the drives were between visits, and was just amazed how big it is. So you're in the San Barberino, or Barberino is in the western
Yes.
part.
So Chianti Classico, to explain better, is the territory between Florence and Siena.
Okay.
It's about 60 kilometers from Florence to Siena. And in the central west side of the denomination is Barberino Valdese. So we are on that side of the Chianti Classico denomination.
So some of the more famous towns further east would be things like Castellina and Rada and Greve. Since you're further west and a little bit closer to the sea, is there a difference in terms of the influence of the maritime influence?
Yes, for sure. Chianti Classico has a lot of different microclimates. And the central west side is characterized by the fact that it is an upland facing west. We are about 50 kilometers on here to the Tyrrhenic Sea.
Okay.
So we are, let's say, in front of Bulgaria.
All right.
And this is creating a very particular microclimate because it's always so windy, and it's influencing a lot all the maturation, the developing of the vines. It helps a lot the wind to avoid the frost that could arrive end of March and beginning of April, so it could damage the vines. Mm-hmm. It helps a lot in the harvest time to dry the grapes if it's raining. It creates a lot of excursion of temperature between night and day.
Okay.
Which
is what you want.
Sure, the main characteristic of this area is there can be a distinction between others inside Chianti Classico is for sure the wind coming from the sea.
Okay. And what is the elevation of your vineyards? How many meters above sea level?
In meters is 320 meters, so about 1,000.
About 1,000 feet. Okay. And on that subject, with your wines in San Donato versus wines in Castellina and Rada and Greve and Gaiole, there's been a lot of discussion, and I talked about this with your consortio president the last time, that he thinks this may finally happen. And for people who don't know about this, it would be a labeling on the wine, on the bottles, where you could say that it was not just Chianti Classico, but you could now denote a subregion such as San Donato or Greve or Castellina. First of all, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's a good idea? And secondly, how far along are they? Do you think this will come into law soon?
Yeah, it's a big project, and of course not an easy discussion inside the consortium. But for me, is something that we need to do. Create what we call the mention, the geographical mention inside Chianti Classico. So for people, to the consumer, to better understand the characteristic of each subzones of this denomination, because Chianti Classico is such a beautiful territory, but with so many different peculiarities between an area and the other. And if we can put on the label the name of the subzones, we can give more identity of the characteristic of a wine coming from this area or the other one. And I think it's a great project. I don't know how long it will take to become reality. I hope soon. For sure, it's a movement already started.
Yes.
A lot of people, like you, journalists and consumers, also more sophisticated, they want to know deeper a territory, already speak a lot about the differences between one area and the other. But to have it regulated with the law, with the disciplinary, would be a big step above for the entire denomination. So I hope it's not an easy job. I mean, to arrive at a final rule, but the consortium, all the members are working hard to arrive at the final results.
Good. I can imagine that all of the small dividing lines and when does one area start, when does another, that's got to be difficult. I know they do that throughout California, and you read some of those regulations, and it's almost insane to see, where the Stagfleet district ends and the Oakville district begins, and it's very particular. But I think too, also whether it's Chianti Classico or in another part of Italy or in California or France, I think that's a great thing. It helps promote the wines and set them off as something special, which I think can only help.
Yeah, and I think that if we can better explain all the differences, can only elevate the entire denomination.
Right. Now let's go. Yes, thank you. Let's go back to 1962 when your father made his first wine. We're almost 60 years now, 58 years, I guess. So, and obviously, well, the whole world's changed in that amount of time, but having traveled there so often, I wasn't back there quite then. I was probably 62, I was 6 years old, but I can imagine it was an entirely different world back then, Chianti Classico. Can you have any recollection of that, or what your father told you about that time?
Yeah, many times, of course. He's telling me stories almost every day. And getting older, he's now 82. He loves to tell stories about the past. Chianti Classico was a very poor area in the 60s, where was produced an easy wine, a cheap wine, wine that was used mostly by local people, family consumption. Most of the territory was managed by Mezzadria. There was the owner of the land, and then different family that managed part of the territory, and the Mezzadro shared the crop with the owner of the land. And this type of cultivation or type of administration of the territory ended in the middle of the 60s. So when my father arrived, all the property was managed with the Mezzadria, with 14 houses, 14 families that shared the crop with the owner. And then everything changed in the 60s and the 70s.
And when you say crop, we're also talking about olive trees as well, correct?
Yes, most of the land was managed with the other type of crops, so olive trees for sure, but also cereals.
Okay.
Yeah, we have at the winery more than 100 books, beautiful books written by hand, dating back to the 1800s, where is written all what happened in each single podere, in each single family. So this quantity of oil, so this incredible.
That's great. Now the painting behind you is the label of Il Poggio, correct?
Yes.
And you said that 1962 was the first bottling of that wine, and that was in reality the first single vineyard Chianti Classico, correct?
Yeah, Il Poggio is recognized as the first cru single vineyard ever made inside the denomination. And this is for sure showing the incredible vision of my father. I mean, he arrived in a very difficult area, and he put a completely different philosophy, mentality in winemaking. He studied by himself. He's not an enologist, and but for sure he was inspired by Piedmont and France. And the first harvest he made, he immediately realized the potential of this single vineyard, the Poggio. The Poggio means the top of the hill, the crest of the hill. So the vineyard located in the highest part of the property.
And how old, in 1962, how old were those vines?
About 20 years old vines.
Okay.
The vineyards at that time was smaller than now. It was 2.5 hectares, and now it's 5.2 hectares large.
By the way, we just got a quote here, a little text from one of the attendees, Paolo Soda, who says, "Il Poggio top," and he has 1, 2, 3 exclamation points. So he really means it. So, Paolo,
I'm drinking of Poggio.
Confermo. And at that point, of course, to be called Chianti Classico, you could not make it 100% Sangiovese, correct?
No, at that time, the original formula of Chianti Classico requested 5 grapes: Sangiovese, Canaiolo, Colorino, 3 red grapes, Trebbiano, and Malvasia, which are white grapes.
Yes.
20% of white grapes, and needed to be produced with these 5 grapes. So the first vintages of the Poggio from 62 to 1967 were produced with the original formula. But in 1968, my father decided to do a revolution.
Okay. Good for him.
He decided to go against the law.
Okay.
And produce the Poggio only with Sangiovese, Canaiolo, and Colorino, so only the red grapes. Nobody put him in jail. He declared it on the back label because it was against the law.
Now, you know, we don't, all the books I've read, I don't think I've read that, because we always hear about one of your colleagues, Tenori, being sort of the innovator with this, with eliminating those other grapes. But I didn't realize that with your father. That's great.
Yeah. But for sure, he started a big discussion inside the denomination. He wanted to produce a better red wine, and he couldn't use the white grapes. So from 1968 to the last vintage, 2019, the Poggio has always been produced with Sangiovese, Canaiolo, and Colorino. The law changed in 1984, so many years later. So there is an illegal period.
Okay. We don't want to be illegal, no. Okay. And so you still include Colorino and
Canaiolo, 5%. 95 now is 95 Sangiovese and the 5% of Colorino and Canaiolo.
And those other 2 varieties, are they more for color or acidity or spice? What is the?
They have 2 completely different roles. Colorino, as the words say, is a grape with a very strong skin that gives color. Sangiovese has a lighter color, of course. So a touch of Colorino could help in some vintages to give some vibrance in the color of the Chianti Classico. Canaiolo is similar to Sangiovese, has not the structure of Sangiovese, but has an incredible generous bouquet nose. It's more expressive in the nose. So it could help 2 or 3% to open the bouquet of the Chianti Classico. Above all, for Chianti Classico born like Monsanto on Galestro soil. Galestro is the main soil we have here, where Sangiovese born a little bit masculine, and it could be, above all when it's young, a little bit closer in the nose. So touch of Canaiolo could help to open the bouquet.
Okay. How long is the Il Poggio aged, matured in barrels?
In barrel, it's about 18 months. But then we keep the wine minimum 2 years in bottle. So we release the Poggio 5 years from the harvest.
Okay, so
We
the current,
release 15.
okay, so the current release is
2015.
15, okay.
Just been released.
Okay, I have a question here from one of the attendees, is Jung Ko. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He says, want to say that, Laura, evening, Tom. He's from Malaysia, and he says to ask you, why did you decide, or why did you and your father decide for Il Poggio to become labeled as a Gran Selezione from the 2015 vintage onward?
This is
And maybe you should explain also that category of Gran Selezione.
Yeah. Gran Selezione category was born in 2013. It's a new mention inside Chianti Classico. So imagine a pyramid, okay? Gran Selezione, Riserva, and Annata. Used to be only Riserva and Annata. So
yes.
We added Gran Selezione. Gran Selezione, which is the difference? To produce a Gran Selezione need to be own grapes. So cannot be produced with grapes or wine bought from another estate. So 100% your own grape. And then a longer aging than Riserva. The Riserva is minimum 24 months. Gran Selezione is 30 months minimum requested.
And that's aging, that's including time in the barrel and in the bottle, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. When the Gran Selezione was released in 2013, I was not convinced of the new regulation, honestly.
Okay.
And I decided to keep Il Poggio as a Riserva. The reason was that I wanted a more restricted regulation on Gran Selezione. I wanted to be a single vineyard. And I wanted to be Gran Selezione Sangiovese or indigenous varietal, but not international varietal.
Okay.
Like Cabernet, Merlot, Syrah
Right.
is allowed to do in Chianti Classico. After, at the beginning I decided no, it's not the rule that I like. Later, in the last year, there's been a big discussion inside the denomination regarding Gran Selezione and regarding the idea to change some of the rules. And probably Gran Selezione will be the wine in Chianti Classico able to have the geographical mention, as we said before.
Okay.
And probably, I always say probably because until it's not decided, we never know. The Gran Selezione will change also the blend, and there will be minimum 90% Sangiovese and the other 10% only indigenous variety. So,
can there be exceptions to that when there's a difficult vintage with a lot of rain?
It's a discussion.
Okay.
Still, it's not decided yet. But I think if the rule will be accepted, will be like this in any type of harvest,
Okay.
good or less good harvest. So I wanted to show my changing from Riserva to Gran Selezione and Il Poggio. I wanted to show my faith in this
Yes.
change. And starting from vintage 2014, I decided to put the mention Gran Selezione on the Poggio.
Okay. Well, that's a good point that you said you wanted to, show faith in that, support the consortia, support other producers, because in my opinion, and I'm sure in many other people's opinions, you don't need Gran Selezione on that bottle. Il Poggio is so distinctive and so celebrated, has such a terrific track record that it's really one of the great Tuscan reds. And it stands apart from Gran Selezione, but I guess it doesn't hurt to have that term on there. So, but complimente.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned the other levels, and there was the Annata and the Riserva, which you also produce, right?
Right.
And what are the current releases on those? And what about the blend and the aging on those wines as well?
So all our Chianti Classico, from the Annata to Gran Selezione, are classical blends. So we don't use any Cabernet or Merlot or Syrah.
Okay.
Sangiovese, Canaiolo, and Colorino. Annata is a wine not available in the United States because we don't have enough. We don't produce enough to support a big market like United States. So in US, you can find only Riserva, which is we are a unique winery from this point of view. We produce more Riserva than Annata. Usually it's the opposite.
Exactly, yes. Okay.
One bottle of Annata, 4 bottles of Riserva.
Really? Oh.
But there is a reason. The wine, the board in this area need more time.
Okay.
And also the structure of the wine, because of the soil and the microclimates, for sure, giving a wine that is more vocated for Riserva. So we usually produce Annata in the younger vineyards and Riserva in the older one. But we vinificate each single parcel by itself, separately, and then only months later, after the fermentation, we start to taste them blind, because it's like to open a bottle with the label or without the label.
Right.
If I know where the wine is coming from, this parcel or the other, I could be influenced. So it's usually me, my father, and the winemaker, Andrea Giovannini. We sit down for weeks, we discuss a lot, and we decide this parcel is going into the Annata, this parcel into the Chianti Classico Riserva, and then we finalize the 2 blends.
Okay. And I'm sorry if you said it before, but the current release on the Riserva is what?
It's 2016.
16. Now, when I was there last September, I tasted a lot of Chianti Classico, both Annata and Riserva and Gran Selezione from 2015 and 2016, which I certainly thought were, amazing vintages, and everyone you talk to is really ecstatic about those 2 vintages. So tell me in your words, what do you think about those 2 vintages, and what are the differences?
They're 2 fantastic vintages, but they're different. 2015 has a, let's say, richer body, more aggressive tannins. 2016 is so juicy, is so fruity, has a great body, and at the same moment already rounder and generous. So in some moment I like 15, and another moment I like more 16. But
that's
we
interesting.
like 2 great vintages.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's a nice argument to have. I mean, it's a nice problem to have. Which one is better? I mean, they're both outstanding vintages. So, and I've gotten equal response from producers I've talked to. There's some prefer 16, some 15. I think, to me, the difference I've found is the 16 maybe has a little bit more acidity than the 15, but I mean, it's not a huge difference. They're both have great expression and great depth of fruit, and are just beautifully, expressive wines. So that's got to make your job a little easier. So
yeah.
And how many bottles in total do you produce?
About 500,000.
500,000. And the percentage of that's Chianti Classico is what percentage?
Yes. About 400,000 are Chianti Classico.
Okay, so that's about 80%. And you also make another red wine called Nemo, which is entirely Cabernet Sauvignon. Is that correct?
It's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon.
Okay.
It's,
these are grapes in your estate?
Yes, yes. All our wines are produced with our grapes. And Nemo is an old vineyard. It's a parcel planted in 1976. So now it's 44 years old vine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's always been pure Cabernet Sauvignon.
And is this treated differently in terms of the barrels that are used? Because you use the large barrels for the Chianti Classico, see?
Yes. The Cabernet Sauvignon is aged in barriques, new barriques, French.
In new barriques, okay.
Yes.
What's the percentage of new barriques?
100%.
100%, okay. And the current vintage on that is?
2015.
Okay. And what was the decision to produce that wine?
Well, in the 70s, there's been a big movement inside Chianti Classico. It just started in the 70s. Producer wanted to challenge themselves with French varietal. So it born the movement that later was called Super Tuscan.
Yes, yes.
Wine produced without the rules of the denomination of Chianti Classico, so created by the fantasy of the winemaker. And so in 1976, my father wanted to experiment other varietals. Of course, he studied the type of soil that we have in a part of the property that is near a river, and he thought that there was a perfect place for Cabernet Sauvignon. And he wanted to challenge himself with a Cabernet in Chianti Classico.
Okay.
And for sure, Nemo is showing a lot about the spiciness, acidity of this area. It's really a Cabernet with a sense of territory.
Okay. And why was the wine named Nemo?
It's a long story. You know?
We have time, that's okay.
Nemo or Nemo in English.
Okay.
It's not the name of a fish, which is quite famous too.
Okay, right.
Nemo in Latin means nobody.
Nobody.
Nobody. It was the name of Ulysses in the Odyssey in front of the sea.
Oh, okay.
And there is a joke in the family because my father decided to call this wine Nemo because he was talking with a famous journalist in Italy, Luigi Veronelli.
Of course.
End of the 70s. And Luigi told him Castello di Monsanto is more famous outside of Italy than in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And my father answered, Nemo profeta in patria, which is a sentence said by Jesus that means nobody is recognized as a prophet in his own country.
Okay.
And my father told to Luigi Veronelli, Luigi, next wine I will produce, I will call it Nemo. Nobody.
All right. Okay. And the rest is history. Okay. I have to ask you, since a minute ago you mentioned the term Super Tuscan.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that? How do most Tuscans feel about that? I mean, is it something that you just accepted, or I mean, I'm sure there must be some producers that just, they kind of, shake a little bit when they hear that term, because I understand it was a wine writer, I think a British wine writer, that came up with that term.
It was Decanter who.
Okay.
It's not a denomination, it's a classification, yes, created by, I think, Decanter in the 80s. Yeah. And it's a category of wine produced without the rules of the denomination. Right. Has been a really important movement in the 80s and in the 90s because these wines became so famous all over the world.
Of course, yes. And
so they've been able to make to speak about Tuscany, to put consumer close to the region. They are mostly made with international varietals, so consumers were more confident on Merlot, Cabernet, Syrah, and Sangiovese at that time. So for sure, the Super Tuscan movement helped a lot to create a recognition of Tuscany.
Okay.
And at the end of the 90s, beginning of 2000, there has been a complete movement on the other way. More and more people understood the beauty of indigenous varietal. So most of the people now want to open a bottle with the indigenous varietal always being grown in the specific area where it's produced.
Yeah, it's easy to understand. I know I'm a fan of wines like that, and it's I remember that years ago in Chicago here when I was attending a class, this one gentleman that loved Italian wines was talking about. He said, he says the French don't plant Sangiovese, the French don't plant, but the Italians have to plant Bordeaux varieties. He just couldn't understand, why. Maybe they felt inferior or something, but things have changed. So anyway,
thank you God. We need to protect our patrimony of history and indigenous varieties that have always been here.
Assolutamente, sì, sì. Your father also makes Chardonnay, which is under his name. So how did that come about? What was his decision to make Chardonnay? Was it just to do a white or just he loved Chardonnay? Or?
Same moment. It was middle of the 70s. He experimented Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon. And our Chardonnay is, I'm so proud of my little wine. I mean, little production, because it's small production of this white wine. Because it's not easy to grow Chardonnay in this area. So there are now 3 vineyards dedicated to Chardonnay, and they need a lot of attention because we need to pick the grape really in the right moment, not too early to lose complexity and not too late to lose acidity and freshness. But I'm very proud of our Chardonnay.
And tell me a little bit about the winemaking style for the Chardonnay.
We make 1/3 of the grape vinificated in tonneau, 500-liter cask, and 2/3 of the grape in stainless steel.
Okay.
And then after about 6 months, we blend the 2 wines. We keep it a couple of months in the vat, and then we put in bottle, and 1 year in bottle before releasing.
Okay. Now let's switch a little bit, because any discussion of Castello di Monsanto has to include the cellar, which is something that's just truly amazing. I think you took me on a tour there. I'd been there on a tour before, and it's just every time you visit, your jaw just drops. You're in awe. You're amazed. It took 6 years to build these new cellars. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's correct.
6 years. That's amazing.
I was much younger when the gallery of the cellar was started. It's a 300 meters long gallery underground that was built by 3 men by hand. They collected all the stones from the vineyards, and they took 6 years to finish. And the most amazing thing is that they started, these 3 men, to build the cellar when they were 70 years old.
Wow.
Wow. Strong man.
Yes. I'm getting close to that age myself. I got a few years, but yeah, we have to think of ourselves as young. Yes.
Well, it's an incredible, it's a masterpiece because it was built like in the Middle Age with wooden arches, and then all the stones, one after the other, cut by hand. And I remember Mario, he cut all the stone, and before putting the stone with cement, he knocked on the stone to hear the noise of the stone. And I always thought, Mario, why you do this? Because this stone, with the sound, you can understand if it can last 200 years or 1,000 years.
Wow.
So only using the one that can last 1,000 years.
Okay. A wise decision.
Wise decision.
And I remember, you're pointing out different parts of the cellar, and there were bottles stacked up. I mean, you have every vintage of the Poggio down on the cellars, right?
Yes, this has been an incredible vision of my father, because starting from vintage 1962, he decided to keep a minimum the 15% of the production of the Poggio and not releasing before 10 or 15 years. So we have all the vintages produced, And for sure at Monsanto, we have the largest archive of older vintages, I would say, all over Italy.
Have you tasted the 1962 recently?
No, the last time we don't open so often because
Not too many bottles,
we
though.
have 92 bottles left.
Okay.
We sell one bottle a year.
Okay.
And the last time I tasted was in 2012 for the 50th anniversary of the wine. We make a vertical tasting, including the.
And I imagine the wine was in remarkable shape. Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We are really proud to say that the wine, the Poggio, but also the Reserva they're aging so well. And we can really show the beauty of Sangiovese after 10,
Yes.
10, 30 years.
Now I remember, I imagine I've hardly had any wines from the 60s from Chianti. I've had some 70s. As a matter of fact, when I visited, you asked me if there was a particular vintage I wanted to try. And I said 1974. And we went over to that exact part of the cellar. There must have been 200 bottles or something that were there, which was amazing. It was very kind of you to open that. The wine was glorious. But I know back then Italian wines in general, whether they were from Tuscany or Piemonte, wherever, definitely had a little bit higher level of acidity. And certainly that's one reason that the wines have aged so well. But now you have to face climate change and warmer temperatures. So tell me a little bit about that at the estate, and how have you had to adjust in terms of work in the vineyard, and green harvest, or when you harvest the grapes, and what about work in the cellar?
Yeah, we are lucky than other area or other producer because of the altitude, because of the ventilation, and also because of Sangiovese. Sangiovese is a type of grape that need a lot of sun because to arrive at the right maturation need light and sun. Otherwise, the acidity could be too high and so unbalanced. So for sure, this is a big help. And also we use different system to manage the vineyards to protect. In some vintages, we don't take away the leaves. We do big canopies to protect the benches. We also believe that we don't like too high density in the vineyards, so we use 5,000 vines per hectare.
I'm going to ask that. Okay, 5,000.
So the root of the vine can go deeper in the soil and reach the water in the soil, and have no. If you have too many vines, the roots of the vine tend to stay up in the surface. If they have space, they can go down. And this helps a lot also in drier vintages. And also we like Sangiovese to keep a large canopy of leaves, so the photosynthesis system can work much better. We also use a system like Sovescio. I don't know the English translation. It's a system to plant seeds, cereals inside the rows.
Okay.
To give element to the soil and keep.
You plant other crops. You have biodiversity in the vineyard.
Yeah, and this helps a lot also to hydrate the vines. And of course, so we decide vet by vet, vintage by vintage, which is the best maturation time, fermentation time, temperature of fermentation. There is not a formula. We really decide vet by vet, depending how is the grape.
Regarding the harvest, has the average harvest date the last 5 or 10 years, has that changed quite a bit from what it used to be 30, 40 years ago?
The harvest changed, and but it's also true that 2019, the last harvest, and I think this is the same for everybody inside Chianti Classico, was showing like the vintage in the 80s. Usually we start to pick the grape middle of September, but in 2019 it was much later. We started end of September, and the harvest lasted till the 20th of October. And you remember a vintage of the 80s. So it's true, there is a climate change, but it's also true that there are vintages that are cooler and remember the past.
Okay. I have a question here from Lars White. Lars, thank you for the question. He says, how old are the Sangiovese / Chianti vineyards? Oldest and youngest? I'm assuming he means your vineyards.
Oh, okay.
And how often do you replant at Monsanto?
Yeah, the oldest we have are now 50 years old in Sangiovese. The average now is 30 years. Every year we plant some new vineyards, like an hectare or 2 hectares, so to be able to, to protect the entire vineyards. It depends. There are some vineyards that we replant after 50 years, other vineyards it could happen at 48, other vineyards 55 years. Depending how is the condition of the vineyard.
Okay. Any other questions out there? We have a few minutes left. I got a message today on Facebook from a young woman that I think you know very well. Her name is Julia.
My daughter.
She's your daughter, yes. And she wanted to know if you could join, and I said, of course. So, Julia, if you're out there, type something. So, I guess she lives in New York now, correct? And sells wine?
Yes. Selling wine in New York. Not an easy moment for her.
Well, no, that's not easy to do.
She's
sell wine anywhere these days. But.
She's really strong and.
Okay. Julia, I hope you're there and saw that. So, let me just ask, just to wind things up here about, I know sales right now are, not normal. It's not a normal time, but what are your most important markets? Export markets.
Export market are United States and then Northern Europe, like Norway, Denmark, Belgium, Germany. And of course, Italy is a big market for us. And then, of course, a good market are Far East, Japan, first of all, Hong Kong. Australia is a great market.
Good. It's nice to hear about Japan because you always hear about white wines and some of the whites from the south. Oh, that's good. That's good.
Very sophisticated consumer. Yeah.
That's good. What and how? I was going to say how often you travel. Right now, that's you can't travel. But during a normal year, I mean, you make quite a few trips, right? I've seen you several times in Chicago and other places. So.
I usually travel, not now, but a week a month.
Okay. There's Julia. She just typed in. She said, "Grande Mama" and Tom. So thank you, Julia. That's it. I'm sorry again. You travel how many times?
Usually a week a month.
A week a month. One more question from Lars Light. Any thoughts? Maybe there's 2 more questions, but Lars, thank you. Any thoughts and or plans for the post-COVID era, hopefully later this year, given what has happened with restaurants as well as the economy in general? Interesting question.
It's a very hard question.
Yeah.
It's a difficult moment, but I'm sure sooner or later it will be over. I want to protect all my agents and my customers, and I hope that as soon as it will be over, we can invite people here and share our love place wine in Monsanto.
That's a nice wish. So thank you. We have to wrap up in a few minutes here. I don't know if there's any more other questions. Otherwise, that's about everything. But you gave a great presentation of what your estate is all about. So please say hello to your father for me. He bought a friend of mine and I dinner one time, and I can't think of the name of the restaurant. It was a nearby town, but it was just had a wonderful time. It's one of the little gems of the Chianti Classico area. So, Laura, thank you again.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody, to be with me today, and I hope to see you in Tuscany soon.
Okay. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, grazie.